Nothing worse would be turkey, right? Well, hello, my name is Jeff Hicks, and this afternoon I'm going to talk about group policy and specifically this thing called Resultant Set of Policy, or RSoP. Now, the topic says Advanced Troubleshooting with Resultant Set of Policy. And when I was first thinking about this session, my focus was going to be on, I've got a desktop that isn't configured, or I'm not getting what I'm expecting, or the user's complaining about a problem. Okay, is there something going on that might be causing that problem? And I wanted to demonstrate how you could track down those issues using Resultant Set of Policy. Well, it turns out you can also use those things to troubleshoot your group policy implementation as well. I'll be touching on some of that. I think once you see, if you are not used to the RSoP tool, once you see how to use it, you'll discover how you might be able to use it to troubleshoot your specific group policy problems. So in the next hour, 15 minutes or so, I'll talk about what is Resultant Set of Policy. We'll look at using the Group Policy Management Console to work with RSoP. I'll show you some ways of doing this with Windows PowerShell. I am a PowerShell MVP, but this is not a PowerShell session. And I'll also, time permitting, show you how to use a command line tool. And actually, I'm going to be running that command line tool in PowerShell and get the best of both worlds. I got a bunch of demos. The demos and the scripts or whatever commands that I run will be available later, probably next week, on my blog. You can go and download them. And as far as I know, this session is being recorded, so you'll be able to watch it again if I go through something too quickly. All right. And if you have a question, try somehow to get my attention. It's kind of hard to see hands, so jump up and down or go up to a mic, and I'm assuming someone will make the mics live to ask a question. So in order to work with group policy, and we're going to be doing this from our Windows 7 desktop, because there's no reason to have to log on to a domain controller to do any of this. So I'm going to assume that you have first of all installed the Remote Server Administration Tool for Windows 7, or RSAT, free download from Microsoft. When you go and install it, after it installs, you go into Control Panel, Add Remove Features, and then expand the Remote Server Administration Tools section and check that you want to administer group policy. While you're there, you'll probably want to check Active Directory and a few other roles and features that you might need to manage. Once you have that, then you have all the tools that I'm going to show you. Now, even though I'm going to show you on a server, just because my demo environment, it's easier, all the stuff I'm going to show you, you can run on your Windows 7 desktop. Now, you do need to be logged in and running this with permissions that can read and generate RSoP for a particular container. You don't necessarily have to be an administrator. I'll show you where you can go and configure those settings. So if you wanted to grant, say, your help desk permissions to generate RSoP data, they could do that without having to be a domain admin. Generating RSoP data does require connectivity to the computer that you want to query. And this is done generally using WMI, which means you need to have the remote management firewall exception enabled. Okay? If I can't connect from my machine via WMI to the client machine or server, you won't be able to do the RSoP planning or logging that I'm going to show you here. Any questions on that? It's pretty simple, and it's kind of the way that we're going to be managing our networks anyway. Okay, so what is Resultant Set of Policy? How many of you are big group policy shops? How many of you are afraid and have barely touched group policy? And that's fine. There's always some people who group policy is still kind of a new thing. All right, so when you have group policy, there are many things that you can configure for both the user and the computer. And you remember, you can configure group policies at the site domain and OU level. And all the policies basically are cumulative, unless you do some exceptions with blocking, and I'm not going to get into that. We'll just assume that everything is cumulative. The challenge then becomes, for user Joe on this computer, when they boot up that computer and they log on, they get a bunch of policies that apply. Now, with group policy, you may have one policy that says, I want to disable this service, and another policy that says, I want to enable the service and configure it this way. Whichever one is applied last generally wins. So all resultant set of policy shows you basically the result. Given all of these things that were applied, this is flipped on, this is flipped off, on, off. This is the end result. And so we have tools with Windows Server that will show us, generate a report showing me this is what was applied, this is how it was applied, and this is the end result that we get for that user. So the benefit is for us is when we're troubleshooting a problem, the user says, hey, I can't change my wallpaper. And maybe the help desk doesn't know, well, you can't because it's a corporate policy. Or the picture for my logon account doesn't show my picture like it should be, like it does in Exchange or Outlook. Why won't that change? So the help desk could use resultant set of policy, because more than likely something like that is being applied through a policy, and try to track down where that policy comes, should it come. And this also works the other way. You may know that you have a policy that says, hey, this person is supposed to get a corporate desktop. But when they go and log on, they don't get it. So you can also use the resultant set of policy to track, to figure out where is this breaking down. Is it maybe a security issue? Maybe they're not in the right security group. Maybe their computer user count is not in the container that I expected where the GPO is linked. Now, if you only have a couple GPOs, that's not too difficult. But if you're in a larger shop, that becomes more time-consuming to go through, unless you have incredible documentation on your group policy objects. That becomes kind of tedious. And sometimes the people who create the group policies are not the people supporting, right, the end user. So you may have a totally separate group that has to live with whatever group policies come down, but they need to be able to figure out, okay, what did this person get and why did they get it? Resultant set of policy, there are two ways you can use it. You can use modeling, or kind of what if. Given this computer and or this user, and maybe in belonging to these security groups, I can kind of predict what type of result that person will get. These policies, I can see that these policies will apply in this order, and the end result will be X. That's terrific for testing and for modeling and planning. Say, hey, we're thinking of a new policy, what is it going to look like? I'm not really going to talk too much about the modeling other than I'll show you how you can do it. What I'm more concerned about is the results, the logging mode. What really happened? What were the actual policies that were applied, in what order, what settings were applied, what security groups were applied, what WMI filters were applied, or in all those cases maybe not applied. Big difference though between the modeling and the results. Modeling just takes place basically between you and Active Directory. It looks at the policies and simulates the results. With logging, you actually make a connection, a WMI connection, to the computer that you're asking about. And if you're checking to say, I want to see what this user has done, that user has to have logged on to that computer at least once. Okay? So I want to troubleshoot Joe's problem on client 1. I can use RSoP to connect to client 1, find Joe's logon, and look at the results that were logged for him via WMI and the RSoP provider, and then build a report and then troubleshoot it from there. And that's the kind of stuff we're going to be doing in this session. Any questions between modeling versus logging? The logging stuff is what I find the most interesting. And actually, as I was preparing my demos, I was running into problems. I was trying to get the wallpaper feature to work, and I had the hardest time, and I ended up using the same RSoP stuff I'm going to show you to try to track down, okay, is it applying? Where is it not applying? What's not working? To finally figure that out. So this is definitely useful information. How many, I guess I should ask, how many of you have used RSoP to troubleshoot and stuff? Okay, oh, quite a few of you. You know, there's still time to go to another session if you want. Well, maybe you'll learn something new. So the first way I want to show you how to work with RSoP is using the Group Policy Management Console. This is wizard-driven, at least the part I'm going to show you. You specify the user and or the computers. You can specify the group membership, so you can actually simulate or say, hey, I only want to know the ones where they belong to this group. If you have WMI filters, you can specify whether you want to include the WMI filter. You're then going to create a report. There's an option to create new reports from existing, so if you've gone through this wizard and you don't have to run it again, you can rerun that. You can also do an actual rerun. So I have a report, say for Joe on client 1, and now it's a week later, I can go back and rerun that without having to walk through the wizard again and generate a new report. That's actually very helpful if you're kind of tweaking stuff. And so you've got Joe and say, okay, I think I figured out the problem. You modify the policy. Joe runs GP update or reboots whatever is required. And they come back up, and then you run your report again, and you can see if the change was effective or not. And then finally, there is also an advanced view, which is really cool, because I'm sure most of you have used the GP editor. There's tons of features, and it's hard to click through and find stuff. Well, with the Group Policy Management Console, if I have an RSoP report, I can generate an advanced view, which gives me the GP editor, but the only thing that's in it are just the settings from the RSoP, which is really cool, and we're going to look at that. So let me jump over to my demo. All right. So even though I've got a shortcut here, the Group Policy Management tools will come under Administrative Tools, and go to Group Policy Management. Now again, this is running on a 2008 R2 domain controller. That's just for the sake of my demo. I'd get the same menu choices, the same tools, running Windows 7 and RSAT. So here's, for those of you who have not seen it, here's the Group Policy Management Console. Here are all my containers, and then all the group policy objects. Down at the bottom here, I've got choices for group policy modeling and results. This is the RSoP piece I'm talking about. Modeling, this is where you would run through the wizard to create a modeling result. I'm going to do the result. Basically, the technique is the same, so the wizard looks pretty much the same. So let's do a wizard. Very easy to use, right? It's a wizard. Now, the best thing to do, because I want to build a report for a specific user that I know has logged on to a specific computer. You can build RSoP, and which is really, I think, the best way to use RSoP. So I'm going to type in a computer name, client 1, have it do check name so it resolves. Do next. Now, right there, it made a connection to client 1, and these are the user accounts. These are the user accounts. These are the, over that. Not used to having two screens here. These are the user accounts that have logged on to this machine, or, yeah, they've logged on. There's RSoP data stored in WMI on that machine. So I'm going to do Now let's grab Roy G. Biv here. And there's really nothing we're going to change there. I'm now very quickly gather the settings via WMI. They come back. And what I end up with is a link down here that defaults to the username on the computer. If you want to rename it, you can. And I have now a new screen that shows me this is for user RBiv on client 1. You get this nice folded HTML report. I'm going to go ahead and do show all to expand everything. So this is very useful. This shows me the computer I connected to, the site. I only have one site, so I don't have to worry too much about that. Okay, here are the group policy objects that were applied for the computer configuration. Local group policy, something called PSR, a tech ed, some other ones, and you can also see the version. So those were applied, and these were denied network config, and it was denied because there was nothing in the computer configuration node, or the whole policy itself is empty. This is my test domain, so I got a lot of group policy objects that really don't do anything. I just needed some policies. But if for some reason I know that the policy that they should be getting is in that policy and is getting denied or not applied, right now I know where to focus my efforts as to why isn't this working. I also get a list of all the security groups that were processed. Because with group policy, we can filter our group policy application based upon group membership. So knowing what security groups were recognized might make a difference. And I have no WMI filters. The component status will show you what different group policy parts of the engine worked or didn't work when group policy was applied. Now, in my case, I'm all good. Earlier, I was running into problems. I had some networking issues, and so I was getting, I think it's an exclamation point or a yellow X or something, that would tell me that, oh, there's some policy or some feature of group policy that's not getting processed properly. Again, that would be a place to start troubleshooting, especially if you run into that consistently. There is a policy events tab you can look at, which will show you all of the policy, all the events that happen as all the group policies are applied. So this is pulling this information, again, all coming from WMI on client 1. And of course, things never work when you're doing it live. Oh, come on. I must have a lot of policy events. So while that's going, if I wanted to at some point there we go. To rerun, you can come down here, click Rerun Query, and that will regenerate the report. So if you wanted to save RBiv on client 1 and rerun again. So there are all my events. Let's go back to the summary. And I have the same information on the user side. I can see what policies were applied, which ones were denied, group membership. Now this is group membership for the user. Up here, this is group membership that might apply for the computer. Again, filters and component status. Now in the settings, this is the good part. This is where I can see what was applied. So I can see the different sections here. So let's look at policies for I'm going to jump just down here to the user. So I had these administrative template settings. So here, desktop. Oh, well, the guy's complaining about the desktop wallpaper. Let's see what's here. Okay, those don't save settings at exit, remove recycle bin, Desktop wallpaper. Oh, and there's the setting, and I can see what value is being applied to that. So you can go through and step through or expand everything if you want, and look through to see what policy was applied, what the setting was, or if it wasn't applied, maybe why it wasn't applied. The other thing I want you to notice is, notice where it says winning GPO. That's key. If I have multiple group policy objects, typically the last one that is applied wins. So if I have, this allows me to have a whole hierarchy of even potentially conflicting policies and conflicting settings. The art is juggling those in the right order. So if a GPO is getting applied that is not what you're expecting as the winning GPO, then you need to go back to look to see where is it linked. Do I need to change the order that the policies are being linked? So being able to identify the winning GPO is a good thing. So you'll see all of these settings that you need. The other nice thing here is I can save a report. I right-click, click Save Report. Now you can create either an HTML report, which will look like this, and I'm going to save this on my help desk folder and replace my old version. And so now there's my same result. Depending on your version of IE, you may get a little ActiveX warning or script warning at the top. So you just have to say that it's okay. So you can go through. So you can build as many of these reports as you want. And if you wanted to put them on your help desk intranet or something to be able to share this information, you could do that with HTML, or you can create an XML file if you have some process where you want to work with that raw XML data. So the last thing is, let's look at this advanced view. So the advanced view will go through the RSoP results and create what looks like the GP editor. Except I don't have all of the settings. The only things that show up here are things that have been defined or that were detected in RSoP. Now, you can't go through, so here's the desktop, like desktop wallpaper. Now, I cannot modify anything here, but at least I can see what the settings are. If I need an explanation about what the policy is doing, they explain. If I have multiple policies, I can look at the precedents to see which one was being applied in what order. And you also get, let me resize this a bit, you also see the group policy object that setting came from, in this case, TechEd. So if I say, oh, well, there's my problem, now I know what group policy object to go back to look at, and I know what path to go to. I need to go to user, administrative templates, desktop. So I've got a setting here to remove task manager, which comes from the executive users. This is a temporary MMC, but if you want to save it, you can. Most of the time, I just am using this as a way to go through to get a little more detail on what the policy is and specifically where it came from. Any questions on that? Does that look useful? Question? The question is, does the remote machine need to be online? Yes, it does. In order to do any RSoP logging, meaning I want to see what the end result was, the computer has to be on. Now, the user does not have to be logged on, but the computer has to be up and accessible. And the user has to have logged onto it once to generate RSoP data. Now, I'm sorry? Yeah, okay, so the policies are stored, the policies, right, the policies are not on the machine. This question is, the policies are in Active Directory, I want to see what's going on. That's where the modeling comes in. We've got plenty of time. So the modeling comes like this. So I want to see, I'll pick any domain controller. So let's say I want to find all my users. I have policies that are applied. All my user accounts might be in employees and under. And all my computer accounts are, do a computer container. Are in, let's say they're in this desktop's OU. You can configure a different site if you want, if you're using loopback processing or a slow network. I'm going to just skip through that. Security groups. If you're using WMI filters, I have none, so if I had WMI filters, I could select one, and that would simulate applying that filter. So that's for users, same WMI filter question for computers, a little summary. So there's the same report, same type of report, and this is showing me if you have a user in the employee's OU who logs onto a computer account that's in that desktop's OU, this should be the settings that they get. I'll probably never say that it's 100% perfectly accurate, but it's close enough to give you good planning. This does not require anything other than being able to talk to Active Directory. Okay? But if you want to find out what actually happened, yes, then the computer has to be turned on. Now, there's kind of a corollary to that. If the user logged on once to the machine, and between the time that they have logged on and the time that you run your RSoP, if group policy objects have changed that might potentially affect that user or computer, when you run your RSoP report, you're going to get the stuff that that user had when they logged on. So it potentially may not be up to date. So if you really need the most up to date, you need to have the user log on. They don't have to log off, but have them complete the logon process, and then you can run your RSoP report, and then you'll know you'll have the most current. All right, and that was a great question. Who asked that? You win one of these handy-dandy power sticks. Thanks. See what you get for asking questions? And what else? All right, so we've got the advanced view. Let's see where I was here. If you want to save it, you can. I typically don't have a need to it, so I just click no. I'm sorry, what was that? Yeah, the events should show you. Back down here. We're talking about these events. Yeah, if there's an error, yeah, see, here's an error. Policy failed because of the lack of network connectivity to a domain controller. And I just right-clicked and did properties in order to view that. So this is stuff that's being pulled from, as you can see here, from client 1. You can get the same information by querying the event log, but this is nice. It summarizes everything for you.
Is there a way to determine GPO processing time? Like if your GPO updates, if it updates its actual serial number associated with it, if there's no update, it runs faster. If there is a change to that, it will reprocess GPO. And how do you determine how long it runs? We have some remote sites that it would be nice to have this tool, which I don't think is.
Yeah, the question is, how can I tell how long a particular policy or object may be taking to apply? Yeah, you're right. I don't think that information is in here. I believe I've seen something similar to that in the XML, we'll remind me when we get to looking at the XML sections, but group policy objects applied. Yeah, because this just shows me the name, location, revision. And certainly there are lots of third-party tools for managing group policy. Hold on to that thought, and we'll see if maybe that's stored in the XML and just doesn't surface up in this HTML report. Yes, in the event viewer, there should be a record that'll say that it's taken this much time to process, but on a more granular level, we'll have to see if we capture that with the XML data. Question? Yeah. You mean GP update /force? Yeah. That's a good question. I've not tested that. That I would think that would be enough. Yeah, his question is, for those of you who couldn't hear it, his question basically is, if I want to do RSoP for a user, and I've changed policies, if they run GP update /force, will that be sufficient? It should be, depends on the policy, right? Because some policies you really have to log off or you have to reboot. So it depends on what you're doing, that might be enough. Obviously, the most consistent way is a clean reboot and log on. Then you're guaranteed to get the most up-to-date policies. I'm sorry? Replication could potentially play into that.
Pretty much if you want to do testing, you normally want to test on the same domain controller you're working on. Otherwise, you have to wait for the possible up to 90-minute replication.
Yes, depending upon how big your environment is and where group policy objects are being created and versus where the user might be, yes, you certainly may have to take into account just your general Active Directory replication of those policies to replicate. That's a very good point. What else? That's good. Well, I got one over here, and then someone's. Yeah. The question is, does Active Directory version, like the forest level or domain level, as far as I know, it should not play into this at all. And this, even though I'm running this on an R2 domain controller, you should be able to run this pretty much against any, say, 2003 domain controller. Unlike the Active Directory stuff in R2, which requires like PowerShell version 2 and latest and greatest stuff, this group policy stuff you can run on against older domain controllers. Okay? But you'll still want to run it from a Windows 7 box. But it should not affect the level of the domain controller. The question is, if I have clients that I need to monitor to basically audit to verify that these policies are getting applied, I think you could. When we get to the PowerShell stuff, there are probably ways that you can do that, and if you're really proficient with XML and XPath, probably even more so. Hold on that thought, and when we get to that stuff, we'll see if that answers your question. And there was one question back in the back. Here, see if that mic is on, if you don't mind. Nope. Can we mic him?
That is going to run, and like the user's not logging in interactively, will I still get the same
All right.
result?
Here, you have to wait. Is it live now?
Hello?
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, say, does the user have to log in interactively? Or let's say I had a scheduled job that's going to run under a domain user. Will I get the same type of information in that scenario?
That's an excellent question. In fact, you get the last power stick for that. I don't actually know. If it's a domain account, if that domain account gets policies, it's very possible that.
Because we have a lot of scenarios like that where we will run like scheduled jobs, and you know, sometimes we don't get the behavior that we're looking for, so I didn't know if I would actually have to log on interactively with that account to get this information, or if it would work the same way.
But it's a domain account that you're using.
Yes.
I would think that a scheduled task is still, and anyone feel free to help me out here.
I don't think if you're not logging on, some policies are processed that on log on.
I agree.
Yeah.
Computer policies are obviously going to.
Computer policies might.
Right,
User
right.
policies, I wouldn't think would.
Right, because it's not an interactive, but because you're just authenticating, which is different than going through a logon event. But yeah, computer policies could make a difference. All right. Let's move on here. I'm sure I must have more pretty slides to look at. All right. So the GUI is great. But there may be times, like the gentleman here who wants to maybe automate something to be able to repeatedly generate RSoP or do something with that data. And for that, we're going to turn to PowerShell. And PowerShell has a module, a group policy module that gets installed when you install RSAT and check that you want to manage group policy. And you still need to manage the permissions. In fact, that's what I forgot to show you real quick. Let me jump back to my demo because that's important. In order to generate RSoP data, and this is done at the container level, so the more that you can take advantage of inheritance, the better. So if I go here to my company desktops OU, and I'm still in the group policy management console. You can come here to delegation, and you can have different permissions for whether you want to perform group policy modeling or reading. This is generating the RSoP logging. So if you wanted to add someone, so let's say I wanted to add, I think I've got a group in my domain called Help Desk. So now, anyone who is in the Help Desk group, on their Windows 7 desktop, they can connect to the company desktops OU and run RSoP data. Now, I may have to do the same thing with where the user counts are, but you have to have the right permissions to do that. If you're a domain admin, you're set, but if you want to delegate, that's how you would do it. Any questions on that? I want to make sure you saw that. Yeah.
So I have two domains in two different forests. Computers in one domain in a specific example where I have a lot of GPO issues, users in another domain. What are the specific implications of the permission sets and where the server or the Windows 7 computer is that I need to be running the analysis from?
That's a good question. It would seem to me that you would still need a good trust relationship.
Yeah, I have a bidirectional trust.
Okay.
It's a result of a merger. One domain is now just a resource domain because not all of the applications have been migrated out of it, but we've got to support it until all of that work is done. We've got a lot of Citrix over there, and obviously there's a lot of GPO issues there.
Wow, yeah, to troubleshoot the RSoP, I don't think it really makes much difference because I mean, it's not like you can pick
Okay.
one. I would just have to try that. I don't have a multi-domain setup to test that, but that's a good question. Any group policy people? Jeremy, you got an answer for that? If I've got two domains, users and computers, and I want to run RSoP, should I run it from the computer domain or the user domain, or does it not make a difference? Yeah, I mean, I will say you would have, whatever account you're using.
So as long as I have a privileged account that is trusted, that has the permission set up in both domains, then I'm good to go.
Well, but on the client machine that you're communicating with, your account has to have administrative privileges in order to read the RSoP data off of WMI.
Okay.
So that might affect where your
Okay.
account is. So if you find out, let me know. I'd be curious to know that. All right, so the group policy module, you can also set permissions, although it's just as easy to go through the GUI in order to do that. We're going to follow the same type of approach. We're going to import the module. We're going to use the import module commandlet, group policy, it's all one word. We only have one commandlet that we need to worry about for this particular task, and that is get-gp resultant set of policy. The name's a little long, but it's pretty clear about what that commandlet does. This commandlet only does logging, okay? You cannot use this commandlet to create modeling reports. You specify the user and computer that you want to connect to, like we did in the wizard. You specify whether you want to create an HTML or an XML report. And optionally, I've got a little demo for this. You can also, if you're really good with XML, and I will disclaim right now, I am not an XML expert by any means. I know enough to spell it and to fumble my way around. But you can create the XML report, open it up in PowerShell as an XML document, and then use XPath or whatever other XML tools you want in order to massage or tweak out information from that. So I'm going to show you how easy this really is. And again, all the demos will be available later next week. All right, so I got a little demo script I'm just going to run that will walk me through things. Okay, so we're going to import the module group policy. Is that font size okay for everyone in the back? Now here's a nifty little trick. If you want to see what the contents are of a module or snap-in, and we use get command -module and then the name of the module. All right? So if you've never seen the group policy module, there's a lot of cool tools there. We are just going to look at this get GP resultant set of policy. How do I use it? Well, I'll have PowerShell show me. I'm going to ask for help, and I want the full help for get GP resultant set of policy. So here's the syntax. I specify the path. This is the path to the report that I'm going to create, whether it's going to be XML or HTML, and then specify the computer and user. And then I've got all the details, and at the end are some nice examples to show me how to use this commandlet. So I'm going to generate a report. I'm going to, just for the sake of simplicity, I'm going to define a variable called $report, where I'm going to store my roy_gbiv user on client 1, again back in my help desk folder. I'm going to create an HTML file. So now I'm going to run get GP resultant set of policy, specify the computer, the user. Now this is assuming I'm in the same domain, although I still like when I'm specifying the user to do the domain/username. The report type is HTML, and then the path is the variable $report, so I didn't have to type all that out. Same type of thing happens here. I make the connections to WMI, I get the information I need, it creates a report, it spits out this little object, just showing me where it connected and how it connected. Well, let's go ahead and load that report. I'm going to use the invoke item commandlet. Invoke item will take whatever file and launch the associated application based on the extension. Because my file ends in .html, it loads up IE. And now here is the same type of report. And same information that we saw in the GUI. In fact, it's the exact same report. The only difference is I created it from PowerShell. So let's go back to your audit issue. Depending on how automated you really need it to be, you could create a CSV file easily of usernames and computers and import that CSV, pipe it basically directly to this commandlet, and create a report every day, or however often you needed to do it, for every single user on that computer. And then whoever needed to could go put it on the central share and go through and look and verify. There are other ways, if you really needed to automate that further, you could probably go, but that's a really simple way. In fact, I was thinking that's a cool help desk technique. Maybe not for super large companies, but if you're a small to mid-sized company and you want to have some like baseline information, okay? So you have a new user starts and you set up a new computer for them. They log on, they're good to go. You run an RSoP report, save it off. Then when the time comes when the user has a problem, because right, they're eventually going to have a problem, you can run another RSoP report and kind of compare the two. So you have a baseline and then look at whatever's new. And with PowerShell, if I can do it once, I can do it for 100 or 1,000 with hardly any additional work. All right? Any questions on that so far? Yeah. So the question is about delegating permissions to run these types of reports. It's the same permissions that I showed you in the GUI. Right, what I showed you, they have to have two parts. Their account has to have administrative rights on the computer that you're querying, and it also has to have that generate resultant set of policy logging information, and that's on a container in Active Directory. So that's what I showed you, that you can set that through the Group Policy Management Console, which is the easiest way. You can do it through PowerShell. It's a little, managing permissions with PowerShell is not so pretty. I would do it that way and try to take advantage of inheritance, so set it up high. There was another question. Yeah, so the same permissions, anything that I did through the GUI, I'm just doing right from the command line. And the benefit is it's repeatable. Like, go back to you. You got a great example here. I can now put that in a script that does all of that for me, and I can set that as a scheduled task. And so once a week, now, of course, those machines have to be on, but you can put in error handling and stuff in your script to log, hey, I couldn't connect to this machine. You can email the results to you. That'd be really cool. Because this is an HTML report, I could use the send mail message commandlet in PowerShell and send the report to myself as an HTML attachment, which would be kind of fun. So PowerShell just opens up a whole new world of doing things. In fact, let's take this to another level here. So let's look at this from the XML point of view. How many of you are XML experts? Oh, good, so I won't embarrass myself too much then. So I'm going to create, again, just another variable just so I don't have to type a lot. All right, so I also have another client that is logged on, another user that's logged on to client 1 called Art Deco. So I'm going to create an XML report. Again, get GPO resultant, set a policy. The report type would be XML. Again, the computer is client 1. And in this case, it's the Art Deco account and specifying the XML report. Goes out there. Boom, it's connected. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to get that contents of that XML report. In fact, let's take a look at that report, because that is right here. All right, so here is the XML. And what I'm doing is I'm going to read the contents of that file with getContent and save the results to a variable called adeco. And that funny thing in the square brackets XML, that tells PowerShell, hey, when you see this, I want you to create an XML document. So now, I'm going to open up the report again. Actually, this is a little bit easier than seeing it in Explorer because I can make the, the font a little bit bigger. That same information that we saw in the HTML reports is here in the XML. It's just a little harder to find. But we do have, while we're looking at it, let me make this bigger. So someone's asking about begin time and end time. So there are some things, it's not necessarily per GPO though, because this shows me like the component, group policy infrastructure, that processing began at 1640 and it ended about 3 seconds later. So they have that for the component. His question was, is it there for each GPO? So here's like the network, well, that one didn't get applied. Default domain policy. So I can see the identifier, some version information, what scope of management it's linked to. But there's nothing there, unfortunately, that shows me on a per GPO level how long it took to process. So this is what the XML document looks like. So in PowerShell, I can just walk through this document using the object syntax. So I can go to the RSoP property. So there's like the top part, which shows me the read time, the data type is log data. User results, computer results, these are the different nodes in that XML document. And I can just navigate through them. I'm going to give myself a shortcut and just get that user results and save it to $user. So I don't have to keep typing all those periods and stuff. Just makes my typing a little bit easier. So there are all the results under the user reports node. I do the same thing for the computer. Okay? I can look at that searched SOM, scope of management. So these are the SOMs that were searched. That's the same, again, same type of thing that we saw in the GUI report. Now these are objects. I could pipe this to select object and sort and filter, do whatever I needed to with this result. So this PowerShell makes it very easy to work with data like this interactively. So I'm going to pipe this to select object and expand the name property for each security group. All right? I'm not saying it's pretty and perfect, but I can see from the XML, these are the security groups that were applied. And everything that I'm doing kind of manually, you could put in a script and automate this and save the results. So if you want to write a function, say, hey, I want to find out what security groups apply to this, there are ways you could just pull out that data. I'm kind of going through a slower way interactively. Do the same thing with the GPO node. I'm just going to select a few properties. Makes it a little bit easier to view. So if you're trying to drill down, working with the XML may be a little bit easier. A lot of the information is stored in the extension data node, so I'm going to save that to a variable $ed. Now for each extension data, there's going to be an extension. This has the different settings, because in my policies I've got settings that create some environmental variables, that map some drives, that sets some registry settings. This is just an array, so I can look at, say, the last extension in that array, which is the don't save settings at exit. There's a remove recycle bin. So if I want to see just the policies that were applied, and just get the name and the state, so I can see the state is the setting in the GPO. So there's a quick, easy way, well, relatively quick and easy, on how to identify, hey, is this policy enabled or disabled, or what setting is there? All right, the last thing I want to show you here with the XML is using XPath. I'm an IT pro from like way back, so my XPath knowledge is minimal. I will be the first to admit that. I'm learning more every day. It's a good thing to stretch yourself. In order to work with XPath in PowerShell, and especially with the RSoP data that's generated in this XML, is you have to be able to identify the namespace for the XML document. So I have to create a hash table that has the group policy RSoP namespace. But once I have that, then I can use the select XML commandlet. I'm going to specify a path to the XML document, specify the namespace, and then my XPath query. So in this case, I want to find all the user results, or the user results node from my RSoP document. It's kind of a different approach to what we just did walking through it. There's another select XML. Again, the same namespace. The slash wildcard will say, hey, show me everything. Okay. Let's do another example. Now that I know what each of those things are that are under that, and this is the way I would normally try to work out a script, is start at the top and work your way down, kind of build your commands. So now I can say, oh yeah, I just want to expand the node property, and there's that same result that we saw earlier that gives me the search SOMs, the security groups, extension data. So now I know what each object has a node, and each node object has a GPO property. So I'm going to do a for each loop to get each one of those. And then each GPO object, I just want to get the name, the enabled, the is valid, and whether a filter is allowed. All right? So using XPath becomes a relatively easy way of parsing out and getting data. So going back to the audit question, depending on what you're searching for, you could generate XML data and then write a XML query to check to see that this setting is enabled or that you're getting the results that you expect. This definitely is another level of sophistication. So this is not beginning PowerShell by any means. Because the challenge is a lot of the deeper nodes in the XML have their own namespace, and so in PowerShell you have to define the right namespace for each one. So in my file, there's a registry setting, and it has a prefix of Q4. So I have to define a namespace for Q4. But once I've defined that namespace, then I can query on things that are within that namespace. So what I mean is, down here in the XML, so there's Q1, Q2. And I'll try to remember to include a sample RSoP report so that you can mess around with it if you want. So if I want to query something under this Q4 namespace, in this case, I'm going to get all those property values and then expand the node property. So there I can see I've got wallpaper and there's this GPO ID. This is the group policy object. Actually, there are ways you can get the actual GPO from that ID because it doesn't show that here. And there's the settings that are being set, so you can use XPath. And if you want to learn more about Select XML, I'm just going to look at help for Select XML. I don't know why that does that. Help. Okay, so there's help select XML. Again, I didn't want to make this a PowerShell session, but there are a lot of things that you can do. Same stuff that you would do in the GUI, except there are command line equivalents. Any questions on that? Does any of that look useful to anyone? Maybe not so much the XML, because that's really kind of I think, a special case, but anyone ever use the group policy module? Was it pretty easy to use, right? There's a lot of good stuff in there. All right, let's move on here. I got one more thing I want to talk about, and that's using the command shell, because maybe you're not comfortable with PowerShell or it's not installed everywhere. There is an older tool called GP Result. Works in pretty much the same way as what we have just done. You can create XML and or HTML reports. This can also be used remotely, which is obviously, I think, the best way to do it. What's nice, though, about GP Result is that you can get even more detailed information than what you can with the Group Policy Management Console that we looked at earlier. So I'm going to jump back to my demo here, and actually I'm going to run some of these right within PowerShell because I can take advantage of running a CMD tool in PowerShell. You don't have to necessarily be in the CMD world. Okay, so if you're on GP Result / I'm going to pipe it to more so it doesn't go by so quickly. Syntax is pretty standard to a lot of other Microsoft command line tools. /s for the system. /user is the user you want to connect to. You can specify if you need to for credentials. You specify what type of file name you want. /h for HTML or x for XML. And then there are some verbose switches and then some examples at the bottom. So I'm going to take advantage of PowerShell. And I'm going to run GP Result, just getting a summary on client 1 for my Art Deco. And I'm going to save the results. Instead of having it right to the screen, I'm going to save those results to a variable. Same type of thing happens. Get the WMI connection, generate the RSoP data, gets loaded back on machines, held in memory. So now I have all that data saved to a variable, which I can reuse as often as I want. I'm just going to pipe it to more so I can walk through. If I did not save it to a variable, all of this information will just scroll through the screen. Yes, you could have redirected it to a file, but maybe I want to look at it and then later save it to a file. So this is the summary. This is not all the details, but I can get information about logging mode, the computer setting, the last time a policy was applied, what filtering might have been able, some of the same information we've seen before, security groups, user settings, Okay? I can create an HTML report. I'm going to create this in my help desk folder for Art Deco on client 1. Generates a report. And let's load that report. Hopefully I typed this right. Looks, for all practical purposes, should be pretty much the same report. Okay? So if you don't have PowerShell or you don't have the group policy module, you can get the same results using GP result. So I could go through and find out, okay, what policy was applied, what wasn't applied, why wasn't applied. Or you could write a batch file to create a bunch of reports for people. So one other thing here. There is a very nice feature. This /Z gives you, I love the description, super verbose information. So I'm going to save the output, and because I'm in PowerShell, I'm just going to pipe it to out file and create a text file with this information. And now let's open up that file. So I'm going to get a lot of the same information that we've been looking at throughout the session. You can see the time, where it came from, my slow link threshold. I find this interesting that it still thinks my domain type is Windows 2000. Policies. Now, I get in the super verbose, actually, it's, I think, easier to go through and read what the policy was applied and what settings were applied. So here I can see what the account policies that came from the default domain policy, security options. All right, so here are my administrative templates. So here's my corp desktop. This was the register key that was set. This was the value and the state. So this gives you, I think, even more information if you're trying to really drill down as to what settings were applied without necessarily having to drill through the layers of the HTML report or even XML. So that is the, yeah, so there's, all that goes through every policy that was applied. So that is the using GP update with /Z as in zebra. Any questions on that? Yeah. In that text file we just looked at? Let's look at that again. So, okay, so question is about the policies. And I don't know if that shows as well. Let's go down to the user domain policies. Yeah, I don't think this report gives you as useful information about the order that it was applied as much as the GUI report does. Yeah, so these group policy objects, I mean, local group policies always applied first, regardless. Now, whether these were applied in this order, it's hard to tell from this report. I would go back and look at the actual HTML report to know 100% what the order was. Oh, and this is, I like this too when I came across this. Shows you the security privileges that the user has. I have not found this information in any other RSoP type report. So depending on what you're looking for, this may or may not give you what you need. But again, this is with that /z, which is giving me a little bit a different format for the result. If you use the regular report, I think it should show you what you need. Other questions? With GP result, with verbose logging, does it have to be what now? Let me come back. I'm old.
The target machine, when you run the verbose logging, does that have to be a Windows 7 box?
No. Any of these clients that I'm talking to just have to belong to your domain and have to be running. That's a different type of, this is logging that GP result is doing. So it's just querying information differently, but it should not have nothing to do with the client. Yeah, I'm assuming that everyone's running at least XP or later. All right, just let me wrap up here. So a couple of resources. The second edition of a book that I wrote on managing Active Directory with Windows PowerShell, blah, 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 is out. There's actually a whole chapter on managing group policy that covers some of this and all the other goodness in the group policy module. That's actually where I'm off to do a book signing after our session here. The group policy team blog, which I'm hoping if you're here, you know about that site. If not, you should be looking at that. gpanswers.com, run by, is he still here? Oh yeah, Jeremy Moskowitz, Group Policy MVP. Should be like your one-stop shop for all things group policy. And then my blog, I write primarily a lot of PowerShell stuff, but I also will periodically throw up some Active Directories and group policy, whatever strikes my fancy. So, any other questions that I might be able to answer? Was this kind of what you were hoping for? People learn maybe one new thing? Everyone got a little nap in after lunch? There are the usual track resources, tech ed, and as I said, as far as I know, this is being recorded, so you'll be able to watch it again, show your significant other, hey, this is how I spent my afternoon, and see what I have to do and put up with. Or maybe your significant other will have trouble falling asleep, and you just pop this up and say, hey, watch this, and you'll be sure to complete an evaluation to enter and win all sorts of cups. All right. If there are no other questions, I'll hang around for a little bit. Otherwise, thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of the show.